The small diner sat on the corner of a quiet street in a town that most people only pass through, never stopping. It was the kind of place that smelled like fresh coffee and home-cooked food, where the bell above the door jingled every time someone came in, and the regulars were more like family than customers. The woman who ran it was known by everyone in town, not just because of her cooking, which was famous in the area, but because of her heart. She had a way of making people feel seen, of making anyone who walked in feel like they belonged. People often said that stepping into her diner was like stepping into a warm hug, a safe place in a world that often felt cold and unfair. She had been running the diner for more than a decade. Her mornings began long before the sun came up, with the clattering of pots and pans and the hiss of coffee machines. She liked it that way, the quiet moments before the day began, when she could prepare everything perfectly, knowing that soon enough, the diner would be alive with laughter, chatter, and the aroma of eggs, bacon, and fresh bread. Her staff knew her style, firm but fair, always encouraging, always expecting the best. But they also knew she would go to bat for them if anyone ever tried to take advantage. Her life wasn't easy. Running a small business had its challenges and the town had its rough edges, but she faced every day with determination and a kind of calm confidence that made people trust her. The diner was small but charming, with checkered floors and red vinyl booths that had been there as long as anyone could remember. There were photos on the walls of local events, little newspaper clippings celebrating achievements, and a bulletin board crowded with community notices. She had built the diner into a hub of the neighborhood, where people came not only for breakfast and lunch but also for conversation and companionship. People felt comfortable there, whether they were young or old, rich or poor, familiar or passing through. The woman had a way of remembering names and faces, stories and little details about her customers' lives. To her, that mattered more than the money, even though the business kept her afloat. On a particular afternoon, the sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a golden glow across the diner. The regulars were scattered around, some at the counter sipping coffee, some in booths sharing stories, and some quietly reading the local newspaper. There was a gentle hum of conversation, the clinking of cutlery, and the occasional laughter that made the place feel alive. Outside, the street was calm. The town was known for its quiet charm, but beneath the surface there had been whispers of tension in recent weeks, petty crimes, fights, and the occasional incident involving bikers passing through. But the diner had always been a neutral zone. No one expected trouble there, and the woman made sure it stayed that way. She had rules, unspoken but understood: respect everyone, hurt no one, and protect the space she had created. That afternoon, the bell above the door jingled again, but this time it sounded different. The usual gentle rhythm of people coming and going was replaced by a heavier, more deliberate presence. She looked up from the register, wiping her hands on her apron, and saw a man walking in. He was tall, dressed in a black leather jacket covered in patches, with a look in his eyes that spoke of urgency and fear. The moment he stepped in, the atmosphere shifted. Even the regulars seemed to notice the change, exchanging glances but not saying a word. There was something about him that made everyone pause. He took a seat at a corner booth far from the counter and the other customers. His posture was tense, shoulders hunched, and he kept glancing toward the windows as if expecting someone to appear at any moment. The woman studied him carefully. She could sense that he was not a troublemaker, not exactly, but that he carried a weight of danger or risk around him. She approached slowly, smiling warmly, hoping to ease some of his tension. "Afternoon," she said gently. "What can I get for you?" He hesitated, looking at her with eyes that were wary but not unkind. Finally, he mumbled something about coffee, black, and a plate of whatever was quick. She nodded and moved to the kitchen to prepare it. While she worked, she kept glancing at him, noticing the way his hands fidgeted, the way he kept glancing at the door, and the subtle, nervous energy that seemed to radiate off him. It was clear he was running from something or someone. As she set the coffee and food in front of him, she spoke again, her voice calm and steady. "You look like you could use a few minutes to breathe. You're safe here, you know. Nobody's going to bother you in my diner." He looked up, surprised by her words. There was a moment of silence, and then cautiously he nodded. It was not an easy admission, but the way he relaxed just slightly suggested he believed her. She went back to the counter, watching him discreetly, making sure everything around him stayed normal. The regulars were curious, whispering quietly to each other, but they respected her space. They knew better than to ask questions they didn't need to. As the afternoon went on, she kept an eye on the street outside. Something about this man's presence made her aware of the usual calm being fragile. There were times in life when a person had to decide what kind of courage they were willing to show. She had faced challenges before, angry customers, business disputes, even the occasional minor threat. But this felt different. There was a line between protecting her space and putting herself in danger, and yet instinctively, she knew she had to stand firm. The man finally spoke, his voice low. I didn't know where else to go. She nodded, keeping her voice gentle but firm. You found the right place. You can sit here as long as you need. Nobody's going to touch you. Outside, a shadow of movement passed by the windows. A patrol car drove slowly past and her senses sharpened. She could feel the tension rising, not just for him, but for the diner and everyone inside. It was a small act, a small decision to stand her ground, but sometimes small acts defined who a person really was. She wasn't doing it for recognition. She wasn't doing it for applause. She was doing it because it was the right thing to do. She moved about the diner, serving food, chatting lightly with regulars, keeping the atmosphere calm and welcoming. Every now and then she would glance at the man, who seemed to be slowly relaxing as he ate. For a moment, the diner returned to its normal rhythm, as if nothing unusual was happening. But deep down, she knew things had changed. The quiet life she had built was about to face something unexpected, something that would test her courage and her reputation in ways she had never imagined. By late afternoon, the man had finished his meal. He looked up at her, gratitude in his eyes. He did not speak much, but his presence alone conveyed a silent thankfulness. She smiled back, understanding without needing words. In that small moment, there was an unspoken agreement. She had offered protection, and he had accepted it. It was simple, human, and profound. The day continued with the diner bustling as usual, but the woman knew that tomorrow would be different. Something had shifted in the town, in the diner, and in her life. A choice had been made, and consequences would follow. But for now, as she wiped down the counter and poured herself a cup of coffee, she felt a quiet pride in standing firm. Courage wasn't always loud or public. Sometimes it was a quiet decision made in the middle of a regular afternoon, in a small diner in a town where most people only wanted the ordinary, and sometimes that quiet courage could change everything. The diner had settled back into its usual rhythm after the man in the leather jacket had eaten. Plates were cleared, coffee cups refilled, and the soft murmur of conversation returned. For a few minutes it felt like any other ordinary afternoon, until the distant wail of sirens pierced the quiet streets. At first it was faint, just a background noise, but then it grew louder, more urgent. The regulars glanced toward the windows, eyebrows raised, and a low tension crept into the air. The woman paused behind the counter, her hands still wet from washing a plate. She had a sharp instinct for trouble, honed over years of running a diner that had seen its share of minor disturbances. Something told her this wasn't going to be a usual police check or a routine patrol. Her eyes scanned the street outside. A patrol car slowly turned the corner, and she noticed the officers inside were looking directly at the diner, their expressions tense, focused. Her first thought was for the man in the corner booth. He had tried to keep to himself, had seemed nervous and cautious, and now the danger he had been avoiding was approaching fast. She didn't hesitate. Without drawing attention, she walked over to him, her steps calm but purposeful. You might want to stay low for a while, she said quietly, leaning in so only he could hear. It looks like someone's been looking for you. He nodded, swallowing hard. I don't know what to do, he admitted in a low voice. If they catch me, it's bad. She placed a steady hand on his shoulder. You're safe here, she said. I won't let anyone touch you in my diner. Nobody crosses that line. The sirens grew closer, and soon a police car pulled up directly in front of the diner. 2 officers got out, moving with caution. They stopped just outside the glass door and peered in, their eyes scanning the room. She could feel the tension in the diner spike. Regulars instinctively quieted their conversations, some gripping coffee mugs a little tighter, others glancing nervously toward the back. The woman walked up to the door, not out of fear, but with a calm authority that demanded attention. She met the officer's gaze and smiled, a friendly but firm expression. Good afternoon, she said. Is there a problem? The taller officer stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Ma'am, we're looking for someone. We have reason to believe they might be here." She tilted her head slightly, her tone polite but unwavering. "I see. Well, this is a public diner. People come in and out all the time. You're welcome to look around, but I can't hold anyone for you. That's not how my place works," he frowned. "We have a warrant. We know the person is inside." She kept her voice calm. "I understand, officer, but I also understand the rules of my diner. My customers are safe and no one gets harassed here. If someone's here, they're safe as long as they stay inside my diner. You're welcome to wait outside, but you won't be taking anyone from me." The officer's jaw tightened. It was clear he wasn't used to being told no. But the woman didn't flinch. Her stance was firm, her presence commanding respect without aggression. Inside, the man in the corner booth seemed to relax slightly, watching her like someone seeing a lifeline. The tension outside grew as more officers arrived, creating a small crowd. The street that had been quiet moments ago was now buzzing with curiosity. Neighbors peeked from windows and some passed by slowly, trying to see what was happening. Inside, the regulars watched the woman, silently rooting for her courage. They knew she was someone who wouldn't back down when it mattered. The man in the leather jacket shifted nervously in his seat. "Why are you doing this?" he asked quietly. She leaned down, her voice low and steady. "Because it's the right thing to do. You didn't ask for trouble and you deserve a chance to breathe. Right now, my diner is your space and I will make sure it stays that way." He swallowed, unsure if he believed it, but he didn't argue. He trusted the calm authority in her voice, the way she moved through the diner as if nothing could touch her. It was more than courage. It was a quiet power that drew respect from everyone around her, including the officers outside. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. The woman continued her work, moving between tables, refilling coffee cups, smiling at her regulars as though nothing unusual was happening. She kept an eye on the man, ensuring he remained unnoticed while also keeping the officers occupied. Her demeanor sent a clear message. This was her space and she would protect it. One of the officers stepped closer to the door, voice firm. "Ma'am, I need you to let him come with us." She shook her head gently. "I'm sorry, but I can't do that. My diner is a safe place and that's not negotiable. I understand your job, but I also understand the responsibility I have here. If you try to take him by force, you're crossing a line you won't like." The officers exchanged glances, clearly unsure how to respond. They were trained to enforce the law, but they weren't trained for someone like her, a woman whose calm confidence and reputation in the community created a wall they couldn't easily breach. Inside, the man looked at her with wide eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," he whispered. She smiled softly. "You don't need to thank me. Just sit tight and stay calm. I've got this." The tension in the diner was palpable, yet she maintained an air of normalcy. Plates were cleared, coffee was poured, and she continued to greet customers with warmth. It was a delicate balance, keeping the situation under control while sending a clear signal to the officers that she would not back down. After what felt like an eternity, the officers finally stepped back, murmuring among themselves. They had no choice but to wait, and the woman's silent message was clear. Her diner was neutral ground, and she would not let anyone's orders or authority undermine that. The man in the corner booth took a deep breath, visibly relaxing for the first time since he arrived. He looked at the woman, eyes filled with gratitude and relief. "I don't know what I would have done without you," he said quietly. She gave him a reassuring nod. "You don't have to do anything. Just stay calm. That's all that matters right now." As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting warm golden light through the windows, the diner remained a bubble of calm amid the tension outside. The woman moved with quiet efficiency, clearing tables, taking orders, and keeping the atmosphere as normal as possible. Her courage was quiet but powerful, and it didn't go unnoticed. The regulars whispered among themselves, expressing admiration and respect, silently acknowledging the bravery it took to stand up in such a moment. Eventually, the officers left, frustrated but unwilling to cause a scene that would further disrupt the diner. The man in the leather jacket remained, his presence a reminder that courage often required standing firm when no one else would. The woman returned to her counter, pouring herself a cup of coffee, finally allowing herself a small sigh of relief. She knew the situation was far from over. Tomorrow, The world outside the diner might respond in ways she couldn't predict. But for now, she had done what needed to be done, protected someone in need, stood by her principles, and maintained the dignity of her space. The man looked around at the diner, the bustling life inside, and realized that he had found something rare: trust, kindness, and safety in a place that seemed ordinary, but was extraordinary because of the woman who ran it. He had come in as a stranger, anxious and afraid, and now he felt, for the first time in hours, a sense of calm he hadn't known he needed. The afternoon faded into evening, the sun casting long shadows across the floors, and the woman continued her work, preparing for the next day with quiet determination. She knew that the courage she had shown today was not the kind shouted from rooftops, but the kind that made a real difference. It was the kind that could change lives, earn respect, and create loyalty that ran deep, far beyond the walls of her diner. And as the diner lights glowed softly in the twilight, it became clear that her quiet bravery had set something in motion, something that would ripple through the town in ways she could not yet imagine, shaping events, alliances, and friendships that would last long after the sirens had faded into memory. The morning after the tense encounter, the diner opened as usual, with the soft jingling of the bell welcoming each early customer. The sun was just rising, painting the streets with a warm glow that made the small town look peaceful and calm. Inside, the woman moved through the diner with her usual efficiency, arranging plates, brewing coffee, and greeting customers as if nothing unusual had happened the day before. But beneath the normal routine, a quiet ripple of excitement and curiosity had begun to spread. Word travels fast in a small town, and people were already whispering about what had happened in her diner the previous afternoon. Some of the regulars were hesitant at first, unsure whether to mention it, but one by one, the story began to surface. "Did you hear about the man who was hiding in here yesterday?" A middle-aged man asked quietly, leaning toward his friend over his coffee. "The police were right outside and she just refused to let them take him. Can you imagine?" The other nodded, eyes wide. "I heard. People are saying she stood up to the officers herself. In this town, that's unheard of." The woman overheard snippets of the conversations but kept her focus on the customers in front of her. She had no need to draw attention to herself. Courage wasn't about boasting. It was about quiet determination, about protecting what was right without expecting recognition. Yet she could feel the tension and curiosity in the air. People wanted to know more, wanted to understand how she had done it and why. Meanwhile, the man in the leather jacket was still in the diner, sitting quietly in his corner booth. He had stayed the night, grateful for the safety she had provided. He had not expected anyone to come after him so aggressively, and he still felt the lingering fear of being caught. But being in the diner, surrounded by people who trusted and respected her, gave him a small but significant sense of relief. He watched as she moved around, calm and composed, and felt a growing admiration for her courage. As the morning progressed, the streets outside began to buzz with whispers and glances from passers-by. Some stopped to peer into the diner, curious about what was happening, but the woman remained focused, greeting everyone with her usual warmth. She understood that her actions had consequences beyond the walls of the diner. People were taking notice, and the ripple of respect and admiration was spreading quietly but steadily. Inside, she continued her work, making sure everyone felt welcome and safe. She served coffee and food, listened to stories, and shared gentle laughter with her regulars. Every interaction was a small act of normalcy, a way to keep the diner grounded amid the unusual tension that lingered. The man in the corner occasionally glanced up, feeling a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. He wanted to say something more, to express how much her protection meant, but words failed him. Her actions had already spoken louder than any thanks could. By late morning, a few neighbors had started approaching the diner, curious about what had happened. They spoke in hushed tones, careful not to disturb the customers inside. "I heard she didn't let the police take him," one whispered to another. "She just stood there and said no." "Can you believe it?" "It's true," the other replied. "I saw the officers leaving. They didn't dare cross her. It's like she has some kind of presence. People just respect her." The woman overheard some of the conversations, but she didn't intervene. She didn't need to. The respect she had earned over the years was speaking for her. Her diner had always been more than just a place to eat. It was a space where people knew they could be safe, where kindness and fairness ruled. And now, her quiet courage had elevated that reputation even further. As the day went on, the man in the leather jacket finally spoke again. His voice was low, hesitant, but filled with genuine emotion. "I don't know how you did it," he said. "They were serious, and you just stood your ground. I've never seen anything like it." She gave him a gentle smile. "It's not about them. It's about doing what's right. You didn't ask for trouble, and you deserve to be safe. That's all that matters to me." He nodded, swallowing hard. I don't know if I've ever felt this safe before." "You're safe now," she said simply. "Just stay calm and don't worry about anything else." The morning wore on, and the diner began to fill with the usual crowd of workers, families, and travelers passing through. Yet there was a noticeable energy in the air, a sense that something unusual had happened and that it was worth paying attention to. The woman moved among the tables, keeping the atmosphere light, but inside, she was already thinking ahead. She knew that the events of the previous day were not likely to end quietly. People outside the diner were talking, rumors were spreading, and there was a possibility that the attention she had drawn would bring even more unexpected visitors. Around midday, a group of townspeople gathered near the diner, peeking through the windows, whispering to each other. Some were curious, some were cautious, and others were simply amazed at what she had done. The woman noticed them, but didn't let it distract her. She had learned long ago that courage was about focus, about knowing when to act and when to let things unfold naturally. As the afternoon approached, the man in the leather jacket began to relax slightly more. He had been tense and on edge since he arrived, but the calm, steady presence of the woman running the diner had a soothing effect. He watched her interact with her customers the way she remembered names, shared laughs, and offered kind words, and he realized that this was more than a diner. It was a sanctuary, a place where people could feel safe and valued, even in a world that often seemed harsh and unforgiving. Throughout the day, word continued to spread. People in town talked quietly about what had happened, about how she had stood up to the police, about how she had protected someone in need. The story traveled from neighbor to neighbor, from shop to shop, carried by curiosity and admiration. It was a story of courage, of integrity, and of a quiet strength that inspired respect in everyone who heard it. By late afternoon, the diner was buzzing with conversation, but the woman maintained her calm. She had learned to navigate attention with grace, knowing that what mattered was not the recognition but the impact of her actions. She continued to serve food, pour coffee, and greet customers with warmth, all while keeping a watchful eye on the man who had sought refuge in her diner. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a golden glow across the town, the woman felt a sense of anticipation. She knew that the events of the day were only the beginning, that her actions had set something in motion, and that the town, the diner, and even the man in the leather jacket would soon see the consequences unfold. The man finally spoke again, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "I don't know how to repay you," he said. She shook her head gently. "You don't need to repay me. Just stay safe and remember that there are people who care. That's enough." The day passed and the diner slowly emptied as evening approached. The woman cleaned up, wiped down counters, and prepared for the night, her mind reflecting on the events of the past 24 hours. She knew that courage often came with consequences, but she also knew that protecting someone in need was worth any risk. As the town settled into the quiet of evening, there was a sense of change in the air. The woman had acted with integrity and courage, and the ripple effect was beginning to show. People were talking, respect was spreading, and the seeds of loyalty and gratitude had been planted. The diner had become more than just a place to eat. It had become a symbol of strength, compassion, and the quiet power of standing up for what is right. And as the night deepened, the woman knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new visitors, and new opportunities to show the courage and kindness that had always defined her. She had taken the first step, and now, the world outside the diner was beginning to respond. The story of her quiet bravery was spreading, and with it came the knowledge that sometimes, standing firm and protecting others could change lives in ways that no one could have imagined. The next morning, the town felt unusually alive. The sun rose slowly, spilling golden light across streets that normally slept late, and the air carried a soft hum of anticipation. Inside the diner, the woman had already begun her morning routine. preparing coffee, frying eggs, and arranging plates for the first wave of customers. It was early, but there was a sense in the air, a quiet energy that she couldn't ignore. She didn't know exactly why, but her instincts told her that something significant was about to happen. Regulars began to trickle in, chatting quietly about the events of the previous day. The story of her courage, of how she had protected the man in the leather jacket from the police, had spread through the town like wildfire. People were curious, some cautious, others impressed, and all of them looked at her with a new kind of respect. She acknowledged them with her usual warm smile, keeping the atmosphere light and welcoming, but her mind was focused on the day ahead. By mid-morning, a low rumble began to rise in the distance. At first it was faint, barely noticeable over the normal sounds of the diner. She paused, tilting her head, listening carefully. There it was again, a deeper, louder rumble rolling down the streets toward her. She moved to the window, peering out cautiously, and her eyes widened at what she saw. A long line of motorcycles appeared on the horizon, stretching further than she could immediately see. The sound of engines grew louder and louder, a rhythmic roar that filled the air and vibrated the ground beneath the diner. The riders were unmistakable, leather jackets, patches, and a presence that carried both power and respect. They were coming, and there were a lot of them, more than she had ever imagined. Her first thought was for the man in the leather jacket. He had been cautious, reserved, and fearful of what might follow after the events of yesterday. Now, seeing the sheer number of bikers approaching, she realized that what was coming was not just a visit, it was a statement, a gesture of gratitude, and perhaps something more. The first motorcycles arrived, lining the street in an organized formation. Engines purred and rumbled, and the sound was both thrilling and intimidating. The woman remained calm, moving through the diner as if nothing unusual was happening, pouring coffee, clearing tables, and greeting her regulars with her usual warmth. But inside, her heart raced. She understood that the bikers were here because of her, because of the stand she had taken yesterday. Customers looked out the windows, mouths slightly open in surprise. Is that 100 bikes? One whispered to another. It looks like it, the other replied. I've never seen anything like this. The man in the leather jacket stood up slowly, watching the scene unfold. His eyes widened in disbelief as after a moment he realized that the bikers were not here to threaten. They were here to honor her. He stepped closer to the woman, still cautious but clearly amazed. I don't understand. Why are they here? He asked. She smiled softly. Because you trusted me yesterday, and because they know what I did was right. You're part of their world, and they're showing respect. By now, more than 200 motorcycles had arrived, filling the streets around the diner. Engines purred, exhausts released bursts of smoke, and the sound created a vibration that seemed to reach the walls of the building. People in the town stopped what they were doing, stepping outside or peering through windows to witness the spectacle. It was a remarkable sight, an overwhelming show of loyalty and appreciation, all directed at a woman who had simply done the right thing. The bikers dismounted carefully, forming a respectful circle around the diner. There was no aggression, no hostility, only a quiet and deliberate presence. Some of them nodded toward the woman as she stepped outside, a calm authority in her posture and expression. She greeted them with her usual smile, acknowledging the respect they had brought without any fear. It was clear that the biker community saw her not as an outsider or a threat, but as someone who had earned their gratitude and trust. The man in the leather jacket stayed close by, a mixture of relief and awe on his face. He had never imagined that protecting him yesterday would result in this massive gesture of appreciation, but seeing the bikers, seeing their respect, he began to understand the depth of loyalty and honor that existed in their world, and how her actions had bridged a space between two very different lives. The woman moved through the crowd, serving coffee and breakfast as best she could, her calm presence keeping the scene. Orderly, she treated each biker with the same respect and warmth she offered every customer, maintaining the balance between ordinary hospitality and the extraordinary situation unfolding around her. People whispered among themselves, astonished at how she handled it all with such grace. Some bikers approached the man in the leather jacket, speaking quietly, sharing words that he could not fully hear, but the intent was clear: gratitude, respect, and reassurance. He nodded, understanding the gesture, but he continued to watch the woman, realizing that she was the true reason they had gathered. Without her courage yesterday, none of this would have happened. The woman stepped back and looked around, seeing the reactions of the townspeople. Some were awed, others cautious, but all were witnessing something remarkable. An act of courage and kindness that had drawn two very different worlds together. She knew that her actions had consequences, but she also understood that standing firm, protecting someone in need, and maintaining her principles had created a ripple far beyond her expectations. Hours passed, and the bikers slowly began to disperse, many taking the time to thank the woman personally. Some offered handshakes, others nods of deep respect. She accepted them all with grace, never boasting, never seeking recognition, simply acknowledging the humanity in each gesture. The man in the leather jacket lingered, watching the scene with a mix of pride and awe. For him, this was a life-changing experience. He had been afraid, cornered, and alone. And now he was witnessing a community of people showing loyalty and respect for a woman who had simply done the right thing. By late afternoon, the street outside the diner returned to its usual calm, the roar of engines fading into memory. The woman cleaned up inside, putting away plates, wiping counters, and preparing for the evening. She reflected quietly on the events of the day, understanding that her courage had created a story that would be remembered in the town for a long time. She had not sought attention, but she had earned respect and admiration in a way that few could claim. The man in the leather jacket finally approached her, his voice low and sincere. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his eyes filled with genuine emotion. She smiled, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You don't need to thank me. Just remember that kindness and courage matter. That's all I wanted to do." He nodded, understanding fully. "You've changed my life and maybe a few others too," he said quietly. As the sun dipped lower behind the rooftops, casting long shadows across the streets, the woman knew that her actions had left a lasting impression, not just on the man she had protected or the bikers who had arrived, but on the town itself. She had shown that courage was not always loud, that strength could be quiet and steady, and that doing the right thing could unite people in ways that no one might expect. And as the evening settled over the town, the diner glowed warmly in the fading light, a symbol of sanctuary, respect, and the power of standing firm for what is right. The events of the day had been extraordinary, but the woman carried on with her simple, dedicated routine, knowing that sometimes true courage is in the quiet moments, in the decisions that protect others, and in the trust and loyalty that follow naturally when one acts with integrity. The man in the leather jacket left that evening, but not without a sense of gratitude that would stay with him for life. The town had witnessed something remarkable, a story of courage and kindness that would be retold in whispers and conversations for weeks to come. And the woman, calm as ever, prepared for another day at her diner, ready to face whatever life might bring with the same courage, warmth, and unwavering sense of right. The day after the bikers arrived, the town felt different. There was a quiet buzz of conversation everywhere, at the local stores, the gas station, and on street corners. People were talking about the woman who had stood her ground in her diner, who had protected someone in need, and had earned the respect of two very different worlds in the process. It wasn't just gossip. It was admiration, tinged with awe because what she had done was rare. Courage like hers didn't come often, and it left a mark on everyone who witnessed it. Inside the diner, the woman moved about her routine with her usual calm efficiency. She brewed coffee, flipped eggs, and wiped down counters while greeting her customers with warmth. There was a new sense of energy in the place, a feeling that something extraordinary had happened here, and that her small diner was no longer just a place to eat. It had become a symbol of courage and kindness. People entered not only to eat, but to see the woman who had taken a stand, to feel the presence of someone who had done what few dared to do. The man in the leather jacket had left the previous evening, but he had left behind a deep sense of gratitude. He had returned to his world with a story to tell, a story of trust, respect, and the kindness of a stranger who became his protector. He would never forget the calm authority in her voice, the steady hand that reassured him, and the quiet courage that had kept him safe when the world outside seemed dangerous. As the morning unfolded, more customers came in, some new faces curious to see the diner that had become the center of attention. They wanted to meet the woman who had acted with such bravery, to hear her story firsthand. She welcomed them all with her usual kindness, offering coffee, pastries, and gentle conversation. She didn't boast or draw attention to herself. She simply continued her work, letting her actions speak louder than words ever could. Outside, people lingered in the streets, exchanging stories and recounting what they had seen. The biker's visit had left a strong impression. Even those who didn't understand the world of motorcycles could see the respect and loyalty that had been displayed. It was a rare moment of unity between two very different communities, all sparked by the courage of a single woman who refused to turn away from someone in need. Throughout the day, the woman reflected quietly on everything that had happened. She had acted on instinct, on a sense of what was right and fair, and she had not flinched when faced with authority. She understood that what she had done might have consequences, but she also knew that standing firm in her principles was worth any risk. Courage, she realized, wasn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet, steady, and unwavering. It was in the choices made when no one else was looking, in the protection offered without expectation of reward, in the calm reassurance that everything would be all right. The diner buzzed with energy, customers talking and laughing, sharing their impressions of the events that had unfolded. The woman moved among them, filling coffee cups, clearing plates, and listening to their stories. She felt a deep satisfaction in the human connection she had nurtured over the years, and she understood that her courage had strengthened those bonds even further. People respected her not only for her bravery, but for her unwavering kindness and fairness. By afternoon, a few of the town's residents had come by specifically to thank her. They spoke quietly, humbly, expressing admiration and respect. "You've done something incredible," one said. "Not everyone has the courage to stand up like that." She smiled, brushing her hands on her apron. "I just did what felt right," she said. "Everyone deserves a chance to be safe, to be treated fairly. That's all I wanted to do." The impact of her actions extended beyond the diner. The story of her courage traveled quickly through the town and surrounding areas. People talked about it in their homes, at work, and on the streets. The man in the leather jacket had told the bikers about her calm authority and the way she had protected him, and they, in turn, spread the story through their circles. She had not sought recognition, but it followed her nonetheless, a natural consequence of acting with integrity and bravery. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the diner became quieter, the regulars leaving for the day. The woman began her evening routine, cleaning tables, washing dishes, and preparing for the next day. She reflected on how a single act of courage had created ripples far beyond her expectations. Protecting someone in need had changed not only his life, but the perception of her diner, her role in the community, and even the way the town saw itself. She thought about the man she had protected. He had come to her diner as a stranger, anxious and afraid, carrying the weight of danger and uncertainty. But by the time he left, he carried a sense of relief, gratitude, and respect. He had witnessed firsthand the power of standing up for what is right, and she had shown him that even small acts of courage could have enormous impact. The woman also considered the bikers who had come the next day. Their presence had been overwhelming in number and sound, yet it was a demonstration of loyalty and respect, not of threat or intimidation. They had come to honor her, not because she sought attention, but because her actions had touched them, had shown them the kind of humanity and fairness that they valued deeply. It was a reminder that courage can connect worlds that seem far apart, that kindness and integrity can inspire loyalty in unexpected ways. As night fell, the diner emptied and the woman stood behind the counter, surveying the space she had worked so hard to build. The walls carried the warmth of countless conversations, the floors the echoes of footsteps, the air the aroma of home-cooked